insecurity or whatever the case may be. That is way more difficult. It's like you get even more sucked into it. And that's where I think so many people have, as you just talked about, anxiety and have that reaction. And then, and then when you get into that formula, it's really easy to keep doing it and getting into that bubble. You have to how to get out of it and stop the reaction in your body is that you really have to make an intentional, put it in your intention that I understand right now I am in a bubble, and the bubble is a bubble of this thought is in this bubble, a bubble of possibility, but it's not happening. Right now in the present, it's not happening. So that's what this the way I work, the way I do it is just sort of thank you thought, thank you bubble, but you know what? I'm not staying in this bubble because it's not real right now. And I need to come back to the present. And you know what has worked for me, which I absolutely love, is that when I'm in that sort of situation in my brain or in my head, I always say to myself, where are my feet? And I'm telling you, Elix, for me, and I'm sure for people, it just will pull you out of it, because when you say, where are my feet? And you look down, that immediately pulls you into the present. You have to, because you're looking at your feet. Yeah, exactly. Well, that was, I was going to say that too. Maybe you're the medium, Elix. I was going to say, it also does. It does. When you look at your feet, it's actually, without knowing it, the roots on the bottom of your feet are going right into Mother Earth, and it's grounding you. But it is just a way to say, I'm in the present, and right now, even if that's a possibility, it's not happening right now. It's in the present. So if I stay in the present, everything is going to relax. My body's going to start relaxing. It's because I'm not in that bubble anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. And the more you describe it, the better. I hope our listeners understand and getting some value out of getting value out of what you're saying, because for me, again, anxiety starts the moment, I know we're going to travel the day before. And it's about, am I going to be late? And the truth is, am I late? No. Has that happened? No. Right? Are we going to miss the plane? Has that happened? No. Right? So I think that's really important, Stephen. And I never thought about just asking myself, like, so what is happening now? What's the reality now? Versus what is that thing I'm telling myself that is causing the discomfort, the anxiety, the uncertainty, and the stress, that my body feels in that moment.
Well, whether you know it or not, when you just said to me and all the listeners that the anxiety starts the day before, I mean, how does it start?
It's by me thinking about it.
It's a thought. Exactly.
By me thinking about it. Yeah.
Exactly. And you just don't let it, you're not just thinking about it without knowing it. You are jumping in that bubble. And that's why everything happens.
Yeah. I'm feeding the bubble. I really love that. I know we got to take another break shortly, but Stephen, one of the things I thought about, I wanted to ask you, but of course, I'm thinking about the question myself, what would be one thing that you wish people talked about more openly in life in general, right? But I thought, but before I ask Stephen the question, I want to think about it for myself. And a few weeks ago, we had Chris Anselmo, who was our guest talking. He was diagnosed with a very rare form of muscular dystrophy, and he created this blog, and I believe he wrote a book about Hello Adversity, and he could have talked about how about the disease itself is, or about whatever, but instead he sort of decided, no, I'm going to actually talk about the adversity, embrace the adversity. And with that in mind, what I thought about, and still we can talk about it when we come back, is I think one conversation that that we avoid in general is to talk about how messy growth is for all of us. Because when you think about what we do, social media in particular, we're always talking about celebrating success. we're always talking about celebrating gains, transformation, becoming something. But we never, ever talk about the discomfort. We never talk about the doubts. We never talk about the parts that fall apart before things come together, before we get to that place. And I think that is a meaningful conversation that we should all be having, because I think that's where the opportunity for growth for all of us, learning for all of us, exists. Do you know what I'm saying, Stephen?
Yes.
So we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, let's pick up on that conversation. We'll be right back. Today we have an open forum. It's about real talk, real life. No filters, no scripts, just real honest conversations about life, love, challenges, and everything in between. And before we took a break, one of the things I was talking about is, I wanted to ask you, like, what is the one thing you wish people talk more openly about life in generally? And I thought for myself, like, how would I answer that question? And I thought that I think we should be talking about more about how messy growth is for us, for what it is that we do, what we're pursuing, because we often, especially with social media, Stephen, we know friends who avoid social media because it brings them a lot of stress and anxiety, because they feel it's always like a competition, right? Because all that you see in social media is, look at me, look what I done, look what I gained, look what I did. So we're always talking about celebrating success. Nothing wrong with that. Celebrating transformation. Nothing wrong with that. Or becoming, but we never talk about the discomfort. What happens when we feel that discomfort? What happens when we are self-doubting? What happens when things fall apart, or we have breakdown, or we experience plenty of things that don't go the way we want them to go? And those are things that I think are just as important. I think that's a real meaningful conversation that would add value to many of us. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, so you mean people not being open or having discussions about the things that didn't go right when they're in the process of growing?
Yeah, like I think we have our humanness, right? We have a tendency, like if something doesn't go right, we don't talk about it. We avoid the subject. We don't even post anything on social media, right? Because and that is also worth noting. So why? Why do we do it? I think we do it because, of course, there's always fear of judgment. There's that shame and comparison culture that we've been conditioned to. Sometimes, culturally speaking, there's messages about, what makes you stronger, manly, whatever. And I think that's what some of the reasons why it keeps us from talking about when things are not working, like being open about it. Like I think it would be a really healing exercise to say, you know what, this is what I'm doing, and I'm failing, or it's fail, or I've attempted this 10 times and I'm still getting the no's, and share that with people. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me, like just a couple of days ago, I was on Instagram and a feed came in, which it was a story. So I looked at it. It was a guy. And then from that, I went to his page just to see what this page was all about. And it was those, because what you're talking about, I think the majority of us do this, but this was one guy in the minority because he's somewhere in the South, and he, as I looked at his videos, because he just looked like the reason why it pulled me into his account was he spoke in such a vulnerable way, like just in such a, I don't know, like open-hearted way that caused me to go to his main page. And then when I started looking at his videos, and he's got thousands of people watching him. At one point, when you're scrolling down and you're not clicking on something, you can see the video moving, but you can't hear what it's saying. And one of them was him, had shorts on and in a shirt that was open, and he was dancing. And so I clicked on it, and it was music. He was dancing, but he clearly looked like he had stomach surgery, like bypass surgery to lose weight, because he just had still a lot of skin just sort of hanging. And so when I listened to another video, he had mentioned that he did have the surgery, and he had lost, I don't know, 350 or 400 pounds. And there was another one that he has partial dentures, and one broke. And on this video, he in his hand, and in the partial denture or plate or whatever is part of his front teeth. He was holding that partial plate and speaking clearly, that you could see completely his no front teeth, and talked and showed an old partial plate that he had that doesn't fit anymore. He put that in, and I just can't believe you're bringing the subject up, because I was just thinking in my head, oh my Lord,
I'm listening to what he was saying, and at some point I forget exactly the word that you used, but you said something like he was just being vulnerable or authentic. I can't remember exactly what you said.
Yeah, I did say authentic and vulnerable, but I didn't see those videos. The video he posted was just a normal post with teeth. I mean, I had no idea he even had a partial. He was just, the way he was speaking, he was going to an event, and the way he was speaking, that vulnerability pulled me into his main account page, and that's where I saw all of that.
Yeah, and I think that is really the golden nugget, that when we avoid talking about how messy growth really is, because again, we're afraid of judgment or shame or whatever the reason, right? But at the same time, when we see that, Stephen, I think that is a way to connect with people also, because we all experience breakdown, we all experience failure, and I be honest, when somebody is willing to be that vulnerable, to talk about their failures or what hasn't worked, or it draws me into, because it makes me, first of all, it validates, oh, wait a minute, I'm not the only one. And almost like what you said to me before when we were talking about anxiety, it's almost like you could then say, so what? So what? So what if you fail? So what does that mean? Does that make you a bad person? No. Does that mean that your life is going to end? No. So what? So what? And I think that is such an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity that most of us, me, myself included, we take for granted.
I agree. I mean, I completely agree. And as a matter of fact, excuse me, when you just said what you said, it's sort of when you become that vulnerable, you sort of like people connect with you. And in the video with his teeth, he actually said, I'm overwhelmed with people that I don't know if there was a video before that or not. It didn't seem like it, but somehow the his Venmo account, and maybe he did say it, I don't know, but all I know is that he was just saying that how amazing people are, and how he was so touched because he needed money to, because he's a stylist, and he needed money to purchase this new plate. And I think, putting aside how it got there, because he said, I didn't ask for it, whatever the case, put that aside. I just think exactly what you said happened, is that people connected with him on a human basis, and on a we're all one basis, and because of that, sent money to him.
Yeah.
It's
I
pretty
I
amazing.
I think, Stephen, that the human connection is stronger when we allowed ourselves to be vulnerable than when we try to show up as perfect.
Yes.
Because, if you're perfect, then there's nothing I can contribute, and possibly I'm not gonna. I would think, well, you could contribute anything to me either, because you're perfect. But when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, I think that creates a much stronger human bond among all of us.
Yeah, I also think it's on many levels. It's also therapeutic, and it's definitely very helpful, because when you have that dialogue with anybody, and that conversation just lends itself to just a very productive conversation, a very therapeutic conversation of, listen, this is life. This is what we go through. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah. We got to take our last commercial break, and but when we come back, I want to ask you that question, and we'll continue with our conversation today. Open forum, real about real life. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I'm your host, Coach Elix, and with me, my amazing co-host,
Stephen Frederick.
Stephen Frederick, Stephen the Medium, who is my husband and a medium. And today we are having an open forum, real talk, real life, no filters, no scripts, just real honest conversation about life, love, challenges, and everything in between. And the question that I had wanted to ask you, Stephen, is what's the one thing that you wish people talk about more openly about in life generally?
Well, I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to many people, especially people that know me, but I wish people talked more about their experiences with spirit when somebody dies, because I can't tell you how many readings I do, and so many times people will say to me in the reading, though, whoever's coming through and chatting and I'm giving messages, and the person I'm reading will say, I had this experience, and whatever the experience it was, and then will always or many times follow it up with, I never told anybody about it. Because I thought I would think they would think I was crazy, or I'm not really sure, did it really happen? And because of what I do and connected so much to spirit, and I think also because of where this world is now, and just people, so many people are looking for something. They're looking for something to hang on to, because there's so much energy. There's still so much love, but there's still so much hate, and it's a lot for everybody. And some people get affected, more easily, and some don't. We're all different, but talking, I think, about spirit sort of in an open forum, even if it's to a friend or whomever, I wish people, and some people clearly do that, but I wish that people would do that a little bit more often, because it always opens up the conversation to feeling better. Because chances are, if you say something like you had this experience, most likely or more likely than not, the person you're talking to is going to say the same thing. Well, I had an experience also. And it just, that conversation, I think, brings peace. And even though, you're talking about your loved ones who you've lost, and you can be sad and whatnot, listen, you're going to be sad anyway. The grief doesn't take a break, right? The grief just waits for you, and it's going to come whenever it comes. So talking about it, I think, is sort of a way to sort of include the grief in a positive way, if you will.
And why do you think people that is? I mean, Stephen, why do you think that is? Is it religion, culture, perhaps fear of judgment? Why do you think people don't talk about it?
I think it's all of the above. I think everything you just said, Elix, I just check, and I think the unknown is the biggest piece. I think because we don't grow up. I was just saying this to somebody in a reading, because we were having this conversation in a reading, and I said, you never hear anybody saying, I went to grammar school, I went to high school, or I went to college, and for the most part, we had a class on spirit, or we had a class on death, or it's just not. It's not there. It's not in the academic world, and it's because it's not there, it pretty much sort of gives that sort of thought in people's heads that if we're not talking about it in mainstream, like we are regular courses, and especially academic courses and college courses, or courses to get you to college, which that's what the whole education system set up for, right? Like, you go through school, you got to get it, you got to go through college to get a good job, and that's how you're set up. I think because no one's talking about it, it's sort of labeled a little bit like voodoo, like yeah, like so we're not going to talk about it, and that's something hard to overcome, even though it has been overcome because of right now. There's just so many overt mediums that you can just go on YouTube or social media like myself, and see that there are people that are believers in and bring through your loved ones. So I think it's a lot of, I think we've come a long way, thank God, knock on wood, but that would be my answer to that question. I just wish people would start speaking a little bit more about their experiences and not be afraid to say, I think I believe that there's no death. And I believe that my mother, who passed away, is still with me all the time. I swear I feel her.
If they, I mean, of course, I would say, hey, the first thing I would say to anyone like that is, you should make an appointment to see somebody like you. But if they're not quite prepared for that, Stephen, what do you think would be an easy way to ease into that process, to start letting go of that old and letting in, perhaps embracing the loved ones in spirit?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anybody can tell someone or force someone or get them to a different place, right? I always say, when people say to me about coming, they lost someone and they're trying to figure out what's an appropriate time. My response always back to someone that asked me that is, tune into your heart, tune into your soul. You got to be ready for it. You have to know that's the step that you're going to take. You're ready for that step. So I don't, I always say to people too when I do readings, or especially if it's a big group, is that I'm not here. If you're coming in, you're a skeptic. I'm not coming in to change your mind. I don't do what I do to change anyone's mind. I just do what I do as a medium and give messages because I know your loved ones in spirit know that it's going to be very healing and change your life on so many levels. So I'm not really sure, like if there's anything, because depending on where the person is, I always say the best, I guess if I had to say something, I would always say that when you get to the place of knowing that you don't know everything, that's the start. That's the beginning.
Yeah. And I think that alone is just such a wise way to sort of like complete this part of our conversation today, because we live, Stephen, our lives as if we know everything. And the truth is, what we know is, of all the knowledge of the universe, and you know this, I've learned a lot of this from you. What we know in the human, through the human lens, is a dot. That's it. Like we
think we know. We think we know, but,
yeah.
But you're right. Yeah. We don't.
We think we not only do we think, we behave, we act as if we know everything.
Yes.
But the truth is, what we know is the little dot in comparison to all the knowledge of the universe.
And that's the greatest thing about this. I always say when you can think about becoming multisensory, like going past the five senses. I always use the same expression. That is where the magic happens.
I love that. I love that. And that's why I love these conversations, because when we have an open forum, we really don't have a script.
No.
It's just the conversation goes wherever the conversation goes, and it's always, always, always perfect. And, Stephen, talking about perfect, before we complete our show today, how was that experience? 5-course wine pairing dinner experience at Sierra on Sales last night.
It was amazing. Well, you know what? That was amazing. I don't know. The company with being with John and Krista was just, I mean, I never laughed so much with those two.
Yeah.
It was so in the whole experience, getting to, because we know the owner, we know the manager, we know so many people there, and it is the most beautiful venue. But the food was my website, because that will show you exactly what I'm up to, and making appointments, whether via Zoom or in person, or doing a whisper in a note, and it's all there. As a matter of fact, as soon as I hang up, I have to whisper inner notes to record. So if you're wondering what is Stephen talking about,
what is that,
go to my
Stephen?
website, and it's really, the service is really cool.
Yeah, and you can be anywhere. I know we have listeners from all over the world.
Yes.
So you could be anywhere in the world, and you could have a reading with Stephen via Zoom. And for me, if you're not following me, you should, because you should be looking at Coach Helix and following what Coach Helix is all about. On any of the social media platform. And Stephen, I also tomorrow we have awesome friends, Julie from the Cape Cod Art Institute, Sarah Rue, and her husband, Jim, Julie's partner. They're coming, and we're very excited to host them tomorrow.
Yeah, and Sarah's husband, Kevin.
Kevin, yes. Kevin will be here. So we're really, really excited and look forward to hosting them tomorrow.
Yes, I'm excited.
So we are done. Thank you, our GM, Jim Jones, for rearranging his life and schedule to make sure we do the show today. Because if you notice, our producer, Mark, was not available. He's actually taking care of himself, his health today, but he will be back next week. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone at WARA, and we will be back next week. Goodbye, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Bye.